Like, comment, share, and subscribe.
JMG, JMG, Block Band Entertainment, JMG, baby.
Usually when we talk about a crime scene or an investigation, there is this expectation of boundaries, right? Like physical limits.
Oh, absolutely. You picture the yellow tape stretched across a doorway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You find a footprint in the mud, you bag a piece of evidence, and it essentially stays exactly where you left it. It's static.
Right. It's contained. I mean, investigators can map it. They can measure the distance between a dropped object and a doorway. The environment itself doesn't actively, conspire against the investigation.
But then you step into the world of maritime investigations, and suddenly that crime scene is entirely liquid.
Yeah, it's constantly moving.
Right. The yellow tape just washes away with the tide. The physical landscape is constantly shifting, erasing footprints, and literally moving evidence miles away from where it originated.
It is the absolute definition of investigative muddy waters. And, when you combine an environment that actively erases physical evidence with human memory, which is already flawed, or memories that are intentionally altered, the water just gets so much darker.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We are undertaking a really deeply investigative, rigorously fact-based exploration into the tragic death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells.
Who also went by Nolan Xavier Wells, or Zach to some of his friends and family.
Yes, exactly. And before we look at a single piece of evidence, we are setting our intention for you listening right now. This exploration is a search for truth, and it's born out of just profound respect and heartfelt empathy for Nolan's grieving parents, Christine Wells Wansley and Elmore Wansley.
Yeah. We really want to acknowledge the unimaginable, just suffocating pain of losing a child. I mean, it's a pain that's compounded by all this confusion and public spectacle.
It's awful, and we're dedicating this deep dive to separating the concrete facts from the swirling rumors, just in the absolute pursuit of justice for Nolan.
So to you, the listener, and to everyone out there following this case and demanding transparency, keep pushing. We are keeping Christine, Elmore, and Nolan's entire family in our hearts today.
Justice for Nolan Wells is the goal. We want the facts, and literally nothing but the facts, to light the way here.
And to find those facts, we really have to navigate an incredibly dense stack of source material. I mean, it's massive.
Oh, it's huge. We're looking at a collection of interviews, police reports, official statements from the Coast Guard.
And the Department of Marine Resources, too. Plus, we have, independent autopsy findings, geospatial tracking data, and just hours upon hours of digital sleuthing.
Right, from various media outlets and independent researchers who have basically combed through the digital footprints of everyone involved.
It is a staggering amount of information.
It really is. And I want to be crystal clear on our rule for this deep dive. We are looking strictly at the facts presented in these sources. This source material includes some highly polarized viewpoints.
Yeah, we have perspectives from national civil rights attorneys on one side and conservative commentators on the other.
Exactly. And we do not endorse any political side or any specific narrative or any culturally charged viewpoint. We are simply reporting impartially on what the sources actually say.
Right. We are just going to examine the mechanics of the evidence to give you the full, unvarnished picture of this tragedy.
Because the mechanics are exactly where this case just completely falls apart. The official narratives do not align with the physical, nautical, or digital reality of what was happening that day.
So let's look at the central mystery here. How does an 18-year-old, a D1 college athlete, vanish from a crowded sandbar with over 300 people on it in broad daylight, only to be found deceased 2 days later?
And how does he leave behind this insane trail of conflicting GPS data, a missing cell phone, and an entire town that is completely divided by silence?
Well, to understand the how, we first have to physically ground ourselves in the where. So let's set the scene. Horn Island, Mississippi, on July 4th, 2026.
Okay, I want you to help me visualize this, because honestly, when I hear island, my brain immediately goes to some remote, deserted patch of sand with like a single palm tree, like a cartoon.
Right, a desert island.
Yeah. I'm assuming that is not what we are dealing with here.
Oh, not even close. Horn Island is a barrier island, and it's located about 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It is a long, thin stretch of sand and vegetation.
Okay, so it's a sizable piece of land.
Yeah, and it's federally protected as part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. But on the 4th of July, those regulations kind of take a back seat to the reality that it becomes the absolute epicenter of Gulf Coast partying.
Right. The sources estimate there were anywhere between 300 to over 500 people out there that day.
Yeah. Trayson Shepard, who was one of the friends in Nolan's group, gave an interview where he estimated that just in their specific area of the shoreline, there were 400 to 500 people.
And their specific friend group consisted of what, 100 and 200 young adults mingling around?
Exactly. Picture hundreds of boats. They don't just pull up to a dock. They drop anchor in the shallow water just off the beach, tying up side by side, creating this massive flotilla.
Oh, wow. So it's just a wall of boats.
Pretty much. You have hundreds of teenagers and young adults wading chest deep in the salt water, just moving from boat to boat. Music is blasting from dozens of different marine sound systems.
And it is brutally hot. I mean, the sources mentioned the heat index was a broiling 105 degrees.
105 degrees, zero shade on the water, and heavy, heavy alcohol consumption across this massive crowd. It is a loud, chaotic, highly populated environment.
So just a total recipe for disaster. But before the chaos of the island, the sources actually give us a look at the lead-up, the night before, July 3rd.
Right. Nolan was at home, he cooked dinner for his family, he hugged his mother, Christine, and he left to spend the holiday weekend with a friend group.
And these are guys he had known since high school, right? Like going back to the 8th or 9th grade.
Yeah, they were a tight-knit group. He reportedly stayed overnight at a friend's house, either Jax's or Wyatt's, the night before the boat trip.
So the next morning, July 4th, this core group of around 20 to 30 people traveled out to Horn Island together. But they didn't all fit on one boat, which becomes a super crucial logistical detail later.
Definitely. They took 3 separate boats. We know specifically of a 22-foot Triton offshore boat, which was captained by a young man named Wyatt.
Okay, and there was also a 24-foot tide line boat, right?
Yes. They all traveled out together in a caravan and anchored together.
So they arrive as a pack. You have this massive floating tailgate party. People are wading through the water, jumping over gunnels, drinking.
Right.
And I can totally understand how, in that environment, stories get crossed and memories blur.
Mm-hmm.
But we hit our first massive contradiction in the sources almost immediately.
And it revolves around Nolan's state of mind and his level of intoxication, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. This is where we see the narrative really begin to fracture based on who is actually speaking.
Because some of the young men in Nolan's immediate boat group claimed he was drinking very, very heavily.
Yeah, they painted this picture for interviewers of someone who was highly intoxicated, stumbling around, essentially suggesting that his impairment clouded his judgment later in the afternoon.
But Nolan's mother, Christine, pushed back on that narrative really hard, and she brought a highly credible witness to back her up.
Right. She spoke to one of Nolan's football coaches. And this coach was also out on Horn Island that day.
Which is such a crazy coincidence, but a vital one. He told Christine that he had a deep one-on-one conversation with Nolan right there on the sandbar between 2:45 and 3:40 p.m.
Which is late in the afternoon. I mean, if someone has been drinking heavily in 105-degree heat since the morning, it is going to be incredibly obvious by 3 in the afternoon.
Oh, totally. You wouldn't be able to hide it.
But the coach said they were talking about Nolan's life goals, his dreams, his upcoming athletics season. And the coach stated explicitly that Nolan was not heavily intoxicated.
He was coherent, he was focused, and engaged in a serious conversation about his future.
We also have to factor in Nolan's schedule here. He had a major Division I athletic tryout scheduled for just 2 days later.
Right. The narrative that he was just blind drunk contradicts both his immediate athletic priorities and the direct eyewitness account of a trusted adult mentor who spoke to him right before the timeline gets murky.
Which brings us to the violence on the island. I mean, you put 500 people in that heat with alcohol, tempers are going to flare.
Inevitably. But the reports of the altercations that day are wildly different depending on who you ask. We actually have 2 completely separate accounts of physical fights occurring around this friend group.
Let's examine Trayson Shepard's account first. Trayson gave a very emotional interview to a conservative commentator named Officer Tatum.
Right. And Trayson 10 claims that he got into a physical altercation over something incredibly trivial, a dropped koozie lid.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. He drops a foam lid in the water, his girlfriend gets upset about it, and then some random guy he doesn't even know injects himself into the argument.
That is exactly Trace Sidon's claim. He says the stranger told him to watch how he spoke to his girlfriend. Trayson told the guy to mind his own business, and then the stranger threw what Trayson described as a fresh punch.
Wow. Over a koozie lid.
Yeah. And they started fighting right there in the water. Trayson says his uncle yelled from a nearby boat for him to get on board. And another friend in their group, a guy named Carter, supposedly stepped in to defend Trayson.
And the whole reason Trace Sadin is even bringing this up to a media commentator is because there is a viral video circulating online.
Right, this video purportedly captured audio of Nolan yelling and fighting on the island.
Bridgman claims that the voice on that video is actually him fighting over this koozie lid and not Nolan at all.
He is basically attempting to explain away the digital evidence of a fight by claiming ownership of it.
But then we have a completely contradictory witness. A woman named Faith Lauren posted on social media claiming she witnessed a fight from a nearby boat.
And her account doesn't mention a koozie lid anywhere. And it doesn't mention Trace Ayton. She claims she saw an argument specifically involving Nolan.
And she says the argument was over his cell phone. She claims Nolan was yelling, actively demanding to have his phone returned to him.
Which is a huge detail. This allegedly escalated into a physical fight involving multiple people before a young woman stepped in to try and stop it.
So Faith Lauren claims that 3 days later, when news of Nolan's death broke, she messaged one of the boys from the boat on social media. She told him she saw the argument over the phone and was going to the police with her account.
And she says that boy immediately blocked her account.
Wait, let me just process that for a second. You have a witness saying, I saw what happened, I'm going to the authorities, and the immediate reaction from the friend group is to block communication.
Yeah. That doesn't exactly scream innocence or cooperation. It screams containment.
It absolutely suggests a desire to control the flow of information. So we are left with this narrative of a random scuffle over a koozie and a counter-narrative of a targeted fight over a stolen cell phone involving the victim.
And this is all happening right in the window when people start pulling their anchors to leave the island.
Now, if the chaotic party environment can explain small memory lapses, like, forgetting who threw the first punch or exactly what time you ate a sandwich, it absolutely cannot explain entirely contradictory timelines regarding when these boats actually left the island.
Or who was actually on them. We are moving into the most critical and, frankly, the most mathematically baffling part of this entire timeline.
The missing 30 minutes and the conflicting alibis of the departure.
Yes. Let's look at the official story presented by the friends on the 22-foot Triton. This is the boat captained by Wyatt, carrying Warren, Jax, and Morgan.
Right. They claim that around 4:30 p.m., their boat experienced severe mechanical failure. Specifically, they claim the bilge pump stopped working and the boat began taking on water.
They claim they were in an emergency situation, essentially sinking.
Okay, hold on. I am not a marine mechanic.
Yeah.
What exactly is a bilge pump, and how does a boat just start taking on water to the point of sinking?
Good question. So a bilge pump is a relatively simple water pump located at the lowest inner part of a boat's hull, which is known as the bilge.
Okay.
Boats naturally take on small amounts of water, right? Waves splash over the side, wet people climb aboard, or maybe there's a tiny manageable leak in a seal.
Makes sense.
All that water drains down to the bilge. The pump has a float switch. When the water gets high enough, the switch flips, the pump turns on, and it shoots the water out the side of the boat through a hose.
So it's basically like a sump pump in a basement.
Exactly. It manages incidental water. But here is the crucial mechanical fact that researchers point out. A broken bilge pump does not cause a boat to sink.
Wait, it doesn't?
No. A broken bilge pump simply means the boat can no longer clear the water that is coming in from somewhere else. To be actively sinking, you must have a significant breach in the hull, a massive wave that swamped the deck, or a completely failed through-hull fitting that is violently letting the ocean inside.
Oh, I see. So for them to say the bilge pump broke and we were sinking is conflating two entirely different things. If they were actually sinking, they had a massive structural issue letting water in, not just a broken pump.
Correct. But their narrative is that they panicked because of this water intake. They say they started packing up to leave the island immediately.
And according to Warren's interview, he claims they yelled for Nolan. He says Nolan was sitting in the shallow water, cradling a girl named Katie.
Warren claims they repeatedly told Nolan, "Get on the boat, we're leaving, the boat is having issues."
And they claim Nolan explicitly refused, saying he wanted to stay on the island with Katie, that he would just ride back to the mainland with someone else.
So their alibi, their official defense, is that Nolan willfully and hackily stayed behind with a specific person, Katie, and that the Triton boat pulled away from Horn Island at exactly 4:30 p.m., leaving him there safely.
That is their stated timeline.
Oh.
But the digital footprint completely shatters that narrative.
It really does. Let's start with Katie, the girl they claim he was cradling in the water. A private text message allegedly from Katie was leaked and exposed on a platform called the True Crime Nexus.
And in this text, Katie directly refutes the boy's claims. She states unequivocally that she never saw Nolan get on the boat, and more importantly, she was not left alone with him on the island.
This text shatters the initial rumor the boys allegedly spread in the immediate aftermath, that Nolan had simply ridden away safely on another boat, or that he was safely left under Katie's watch.
She removes herself entirely from their alibi. And then we have Javon. Javon is another friend who was on the island that day, a young black man who actually grew up with Nolan.
He did an interview with TMZ that completely upends the 4:30 p.m. timeline. Javon states that around 3:40 p.m., he walked away from the immediate boat area to check on a friend who had just been in an altercation.
He says he was gone for about 15 to 20 minutes trying to calm this friend down. When he returned to the spot where they had anchored at approximately 3:55 to 4:0 p.m., the boats that Nolan had arrived on were gone.
Gone. Not packing up, not yelling for Nolan, just physically gone.
And Nolan was nowhere to be found.
Right.
Here's where my brain gets completely stuck. Javon, an eyewitness who has absolutely no reason to lie, says the boats were physically gone by 4:0 p.m. But Warren and the friends on the Triton insist they didn't leave until 4:30 p.m.
It creates this massive 30-minute discrepancy. Where was the Triton boat for those 30 minutes between 4:0 p.m. and 4:30 p.m.?
Did they pull away from the sandbar, realize something was wrong, and just idle offshore? Did they leave the immediate area and come back?
It's the biggest question. And let's pause there because I want to look at this purely from a behavioral standpoint. Forget the exact timestamps for a second.
Right. Just human logic.
Yes. You are 10 miles offshore. Your friend's car keys are sitting on an Xbox back at your house. Your friend's cell phone is sitting on the dashboard of your boat.
And you are claiming your boat is in a mechanical emergency.
Do you really just yell at your friend once or twice, shrug your shoulders, and drive away, leaving him stranded in the ocean with no communication device, no keys to get home, and no confirmed ride?
The behavioral logic just completely collapses on itself, especially when we factor in the coach's testimony that Nolan was not heavily intoxicated.
Exactly. We are asked to believe that a sober, rational 18-year-old athlete with a D1 tryout in 2 days actively chose to be stranded 10 miles offshore with no phone and no keys.
It makes absolutely no sense. But, human memory is fallible, and human testimony can be biased or completely fabricated to protect oneself. But it doesn't lie.
The hard, unfeeling digital and nautical records. Let's transition from eyewitness accounts to the hard data. We really have to look at the CTOW distress call.
Okay, let's explain what CTOW is for anyone who doesn't boat.
So, CTOW is a marine assistance provider. Think of it like AAA, but for boaters. If you run out of gas, if your engine dies, or if you need a tow back to the marina, you call CTOW over a VHF marine radio or your cell phone.
Right. And the friends on the Triton claim that because their bilge pump failed and they were taking on water, they called CTOW for an emergency rescue. And we actually have the records of this call. The friends called CTOW at exactly 4:00 p.m.
This is where the nautical data absolutely contradicts their testimony. The GPS tracking data from the Triton's Garmin navigation system was later pulled and reviewed by the Department of Marine Resources.
And what does it say?
That Garmin data showed that the boat did not physically leave its coordinates at Horn Island until 4:30 p.m.
You're telling me they are sitting securely anchored at a sandbar. They call an emergency tow company at 4:00 p.m. saying they are actively sinking, but they don't actually leave the island for another 30 minutes.
Exactly. And independent boating researchers have pointed out a massive flaw in the physics of this story.
Oh, this is the sinking physics part.
Yes. If a 22-foot boat is actively taking on enough water to be considered sinking, meaning water is breaching the deck or flooding the hull faster than it can be bailed, the mathematics of buoyancy are very unforgiving.
How much time do you have?
You have a maximum of 2 to 15 minutes before that vessel goes completely under the surface.
And Horn Island is 10 miles offshore. The closest shoreline from the western tip of the island is a 20 to 40-minute drive at a decent speed.
Right. If you are sinking and you pull away from the safety of a shallow sandbar into deep, open water, you are guaranteeing that your boat will go to the bottom of the ocean. It is a suicidal nautical maneuver.
So how did they survive the trip?
They survived because evidence suggests the emergency rescue call to Sea Tao was mysteriously canceled shortly after it was made.
Wait, canceled.
Yes. The boat wasn't sinking. They didn't actually need the rescue. They drove the boat back to the mainland themselves.
So why make the panicked call to a recorded emergency line at all?
This raises a terrifying question, one heavily debated by researchers analyzing this case. Was the Sea Tao call a manufactured digital alibi?
Oh, wow. So you're saying if you know something terrible has just happened on or near your boat, calling a recorded emergency line to establish a timestamp of yourselves in a panic about a sinking boat is a very specific way to lay down a trail of digital innocence.
Yes, exactly. You are creating a crisis to explain your erratic behavior or your sudden departure.
That theory, that the call was a cover-up, is heavily bolstered by the audio of the emergency call itself.
It really is. An audio engineer named Janetta Brantley took the official emergency recording released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources and analyzed it.
She downloaded the raw audio file into Logic Pro X, which is professional audio editing software. She stated she ran a dual monic isolation EQ process on the file.
Which sounds super technical.
Yeah, hold on. Dual monic isolation EQ sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. In plain English, what is she actually doing to that audio file?
In plain English, she is stripping away the garbage noise. When you make a call on a boat, the microphone picks up the wind, the low rumble of the boat engine, the splashing of water.
All the background chaos.
Right. All of those sounds occupy certain frequencies on the audio spectrum. Human vocal cords occupy a different specific frequency range. An isolation EQ process allows an engineer to mute the frequencies of the wind and engine and turn the volume all the way up on the human vocal frequencies in the background.
So she is peeling back the layers of sound to hear what is happening behind the person talking to the dispatcher.
Exactly. And what she uncovered in that isolated background audio is absolutely chilling.
Tell me.
Behind the voice of the person speaking to the Sea Tao dispatcher, you can clearly hear a distressed voice shouting, "Damn it, Bart, Nolan's really dead."
Wow. Now, rule check here. We have to state clearly for you listening that this is an independent audio enhancement. It has not been officially confirmed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department or the FBI as authenticated admissible evidence.
No, it hasn't, but it is out there in the public sphere, and it raises massive, blaring red flags for anyone investigating this timeline.
How can you claim, as your official alibi, that Nolan is safely sitting on an island with a girl while someone on your boat is seemingly screaming that he is dead in the background of a dispatch call made at 4:00 p.m.?
You can't. The contradictions just don't stop with Sea Tao either. We also have to look at the United States Coast Guard.
Right, because if you have a true maritime emergency, the Coast Guard is the ultimate authority.
Initially, Petty Officer Cheyenne Basurdo with the Coast Guard Heartland District stated that they were not notified about Nolan's disappearance until 12:26 p.m. on July 5th.
That's the next day.
Yeah. That's when the local sheriff's department finally requested their assistance for a search and rescue. But then the Coast Guard had to issue a highly unusual official correction.
What did they correct?
They retracted their initial statement and confirmed that a friend of Nolan's did in fact contact the Coast Guard on the night of July 4th at around 11:00 p.m.
Let's just map that timeline out because it is absurd. The boys claim they left Horn Island, leaving Nolan behind, at 4:30 p.m. They drive back to the mainland. They get off the boat.
Right.
They go to a pool party at a friend's house. Hours and hours go by. It isn't until 11:00 p.m., 6.5 hours after they allegedly last saw him, that they suddenly decide to call the Coast Guard to report him missing.
And the timing of that 11:00 p.m. call is not a coincidence. It happened precisely because Nolan's mother, Christine, had started looking for him.
Yeah, Christine and Nolan's aunt were getting incredibly worried. Nolan was a kid who checked in constantly. He was communicative, but he had been completely silent since he left for the island.
So they do what any parent would do today. They checked a tracking app on their phones. The sources mention it was either Life 360 or the Snapchat Maps feature.
For those who might not use it, Snapchat has a feature where, if you allow it, it pings your phone's internal GPS and broadcasts your exact location on a digital map to your friends.
Right, and it updates whenever the app is opened or running in the background. So Christine pulls up the map, and she sees that Nolan's phone is not out in the ocean.
No, it is sitting stationary at a house on the mainland.
It was only after the family began tracking the phone and asking questions within the friend group that Warren called Christine. Around 11:00 p.m., Warren calls and asks, "Have you talked to Nolan? We can't get a hold of him."
And Christine replied, "His location is showing he's with you all."
It was at that exact moment, when confronted with the reality that the family was tracking the GPS data of the phone, that Warren allegedly admitted, oh, well, he left his phone with us on the boat.
Which pivots our deep dive from the nautical data directly into the digital data. Because if the boat's Garmin GPS is one digital footprint, Nolan's cell phone is the absolute holy grail of this investigation.
Oh, absolutely. It holds the key to his communications, his location, and potentially his state of mind. Let's talk about the physical custody of that cell phone for a second.
Yeah,
The boys claim that leaving a phone on a boat is totally normal behavior. They argue that because everyone is chest deep in salt water, everyone leaves their expensive electronics on the dashboard of the center console.
they say Nolan's phone was just one of many left on Wyatt's boat.
That might be standard practice while you are physically in the water swimming, but if you are making an active, conscious decision to stay on an island and find a ride home with a completely different group of people, you do not leave your phone on the boat that is departing.
No. You wade over to the boat, you grab your phone, you grab your wallet. Especially an 18-year-old kid. Their entire social life, their communication, their banking, the ride-sharing apps, it is all on that device.
Exactly. So late on the night of July 4th, after Warren's phone call admitting they had the device, a family friend of the Wansleys drove over to retrieve Nolan's phone from the boys.
And when the family finally got the phone open, they noticed something highly, highly suspicious.
All of his Snapchat history, all of his messages, all of his location tracking history for the entirety of July 4th had been completely wiped clean. Deleted.
The digital footprint of his final day was erased before the phone was handed over to his mother. Now let's talk about how that actually works mechanically, because you don't just accidentally wipe a day's worth of data.
You definitely don't. Deleting an app's history requires intent. It requires unlocking the phone, navigating through the settings menus of specific applications, selecting the data cache, and executing a deletion command.
It is a multi-step process.
It's like someone realized they walked through a muddy house, but instead of just trying to wipe up their own footprints with a towel, they decided to set the entire carpet on fire.
That's a great way to put it. Deleting an entire day's history doesn't say I wasn't there. It screams, I am terrified of what you will find if I leave this data intact.
The friends naturally deny touching his phone at all. Warren stated in a media interview, "None of us have access to Nolan's password to get on his phone and delete anything. We have no reason to delete anything."
But the deleted data immediately turned that cell phone into the most contested piece of evidence in Jackson County, which led to an intense, high-stakes legal battle over the chain of custody between the Wansley family and the local district attorney, Angel Myers McElrath.
Right. The DA sent these aggressive legal letters to the family's legal team, basically demanding that the family hand over Nolan's cell phone to local authorities within 24 to 48 hours.
Let me explain the leverage here, because if a DA demands evidence and you refuse, you can be charged with obstruction.
It's a huge threat.
Right. But imagine a physical crime scene inside a house. You suspect that the local police precinct might be biased or incompetent or perhaps culturally tied to the people you think committed the crime. You do not just hand over the only key to that house to a local precinct, cross your fingers and hope they do a thorough, unbiased job.
Because once they enter that house alone, they completely control the narrative of what they find. If digital data is extracted by a local sheriff's IT department without oversight, and they claim they found nothing relevant, the family has no way to verify that.
The data could be further corrupted or selectively analyzed.
Exactly. So you don't give them the key, you lock the door, you stand guard, and you wait for the federal inspectors to arrive so everyone can walk in together.
And that is exactly what the family did. Represented by renowned civil rights attorney Ben Crump and joined by the NAACP Office of General Counsel, the family legally refused to hand the phone over blindly to a local sheriff's department that had already prematurely declared no foul play.
Instead of surrendering the device on July 15th, the family's legal team reached an agreement with the DA for a joint forensic examination. They scheduled it for August 18th through the 21st.
So they forced a scenario of total transparency.
Yes. The agreement legally mandated that the family's independent digital forensics experts, and potentially the FBI, would be physically present in the room alongside local investigators when the Celebrate machine, the device used to pull data off the physical memory chips, was plugged into the phone.
But look at how the DA's actions spun the media narrative. By sending letters demanding the phone within 48 hours, knowing full well the family was out of town and already preparing for an agreed-upon joint exam later that month, the DA manufactured a narrative that the grieving parents were being uncooperative.
It was incredibly manipulative. The conservative commentators and the lawyers representing the boys went on national television. They literally went on Nancy Grace and said, look, the family is hiding the phone. They aren't cooperating. How do they know texts are deleted if they won't give it to the police?
It was just a masterclass in shifting the blame onto the victim's parents, framing them as obstructionists.
When in reality, they were following the exact legal protocols necessary to protect the integrity of the most crucial piece of evidence from a potentially compromised local investigation.
It is a devastating position for a family to be in, to lose a child and then have to spend your energy playing defense against the local justice system just to ensure a fair investigation.
And while the digital evidence remains locked inside that cell phone waiting for that joint extraction, the physical evidence of what actually happened to Nolan's body is equally fraught with controversy, secrecy, and profound grief.
I want to take a breath here and really reiterate our heartfelt condolences to Christine and Elmore. Having to endure the public clinical debate over the autopsy of your child is a nightmare no parent should ever have to face.
It is truly heartbreaking, and we discuss this with the utmost respect for Nolan, but the physical findings are vital to finding the truth.
Right. So on the morning of July 6th, 2 days after he vanished, Nolan's body was discovered face down on the shoreline of the northwestern tip of Horn Island.
And the initial police reports, released almost immediately by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, suggested there were no signs of foul play.
They strongly suspected it was a tragic accidental drowning. They cited the dangerous rip currents that can swirl around the barrier islands in the Gulf.
Now, rip currents are a very real danger. They are powerful, narrow channels of fast-moving water that can pull even strong swimmers out to sea. However, the family did not accept that rapid conclusion, given all the surrounding bizarre behavior of the friends.
Of course not. So they sought an independent autopsy. Funded by civil rights activist and former NFL player Colin Kaepernick, renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell was brought in to conduct a second independent autopsy on July 10th.
And Dr. Mitchell's official conclusion regarding the cause and manner of death was undetermined.
He couldn't say for sure.
Right. He could not definitively say how Nolan died based on the physical evidence available to him. But his report raised massive, terrifying red flags regarding how the state handled the body.
First, Dr. Mitchell noted that there were no major bone fractures or deep tissue trauma to the body. No broken arms or ribs. However, he did find a specific, unexplained red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head, specifically in the occipital area.
The occipital bone is the saucer-shaped bone at the lower back of the skull. A red discoloration in the soft tissue there could imply blunt force trauma, a strike to the back of the head that didn't necessarily fracture the skull but caused deep bruising.
But here's the most crucial and frankly the most disturbing detail of the independent autopsy. Dr. Mitchell noted that the initial state medical examiner who performed the first autopsy had retained Nolan's internal anterior neck structures.
They kept his throat. They excised and kept his trachea, the hyoid bone, and the surrounding cartilage.
Wait, I'm just confused. If you're doing an autopsy to see if someone drowned, wouldn't you just look at the lungs to see if they're full of salt water? Why does missing a windpipe completely paralyze the independent investigation?
It matters fundamentally to the biological mechanics of pathology. Drowning is not just water in the lungs.
What else is it?
When someone drowns, the body goes into violent spasms. The airways, the trachea, and the lungs all interact with the aspirated fluid. A pathologist examines the trachea for the presence of foam, diatoms, which are microscopic algae, and specific types of fluid retention.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so if an independent pathologist is handed a body that does not have a trachea or a throat, they cannot adequately test the airways, meaning they cannot scientifically confirm the state's theory of a drowning.
So they took the exact evidence needed to verify their own claim.
It gets worse. Without the intricate bones, cartilage, and soft tissue of the anterior neck, a pathologist cannot rule out other causes of death.
Like what?
They need to examine the hyoid bone, a delicate horseshoe-shaped bone in the neck, to see if it is fractured, which is a classic sign of manual strangulation. They need to look for petechial hemorrhaging or deep tissue bruising in the neck muscles to rule out neck compression, a chokehold, or a blunt force strike to the throat.
By withholding that specific vital anatomy, the state essentially paralyzed Dr. Mitchell's ability to verify or refute the state's own theory.
That is exactly right.
That is staggering. Why was this specific anatomy withheld? Was it just sloppy standard procedure, or was it a deliberate attempt to hide evidence of a homicide?
It's the question everyone is asking.
Because there are rumors swirling in the sources,
Yeah.
and again, we must clearly state these are unverified rumors, that Nolan was put into a chokehold during an altercation or hit with something metal. If the throat is missing, you can't scientifically prove or disprove those theories. The evidence is literally gone.
And with the official state autopsy results completely sealed from the public until a grand jury convenes, a massive vacuum of verified information was created. And when there is an information vacuum in a high-profile case involving a grieving family and a tight-knit local community, the internet always rushes in to fill it.
Which brings us to the massive cultural and media clash surrounding this case. The internet sleuths got to work, pulling record, analyzing photos, and the narrative fractured aggressively along racial and political lines.
We must look impartially at how both sides are framing this, because the media friction is not just background noise. It is actively shaping how the public perceives the investigation and how the DA and the family are forced to maneuver.
Absolutely. Let's look at the conservative viewpoint, which has been heavily pushed by commentators like the Officer Tatum.
Officer Tatum actually traveled to Mississippi and interviewed 4 of the boys from the boat on camera: Warren, Jax, Morgan, and Trey Tatum.
The narrative presented in this viewpoint is that these young men are entirely innocent. They are being unfairly vilified by a rush to judgment fueled by out-of-state racial activists looking for a headline.
The conservative viewpoint points out that Ocean Springs is a tight-knit boating community where everyone knows everyone, not a hotbed of racial animus. They heavily highlight Trace and Shepard's involvement in the group.
All right, Trace Mason is a young black man who was part of the friend group on the island. He went on camera to passionately defend his white friends, stating emphatically that they do not see race, they grew up together, and they would never hurt Nolan.
Trace Mason talked about how he is now suffering immense backlash for defending them. He claims he's being called awful names online, told he's not black enough, and effectively cast out of the black community for standing by the boys on the boat.
From the conservative viewpoint, this is a tragic accidental drowning that is being politically weaponized by grifters to destroy the lives of innocent young men.
Conversely, we have the left, or the civil rights viewpoint, championed by Benjamin Crump, Reverend Al Sharpton, the NAACP, and even the Congressional Black Caucus.
And this viewpoint points directly to Mississippi's dark, thoroughly documented history of racial violence and local law enforcement cover-ups. They reference historical cases like Emmett Till, where the justice system actively protected the perpetrators.
They are asking a very valid structural question. Why does a young black man die at a predominantly white gathering, and local law enforcement immediately, within hours, rules out foul play without conducting a complete forensic investigation?
Without securing the cell phones of the witnesses, and without locking down the boats as crime scenes.
The civil rights view sees the rapid declaration of accidental drowning, the wiped phone data, the delayed Coast Guard calls, and the withheld autopsy organs as classic hallmarks of a good old boy network.
They believe local authorities are covering up a crime to protect the sons of prominent local families from the consequences of a party gone horribly wrong.
As we promised, we're not taking a side on the politics here. We're looking at the mechanics of the case. But we must acknowledge that this intense polarization is causing real-world damage.
The dark side of internet sleuthing has really reared its head, and people are taking the law into their own hands from behind their keyboards.
The vacuum of information led to horrific vigilante behavior online. Death threats and bomb threats were made against the boys who were on the boat, against their extended families, and even against a local judge.
Who happens to be Warren's stepmother, by the way. The jurisdictional leaps here are insane. It escalated all the way to the federal level.
Federal authorities had to step in and make arrests across state lines. They arrested a man named Edward James Porter in Berwyn, Illinois, who had a long criminal history.
Federal prosecutors accuse him of threatening to murder witnesses. And horrifically, he is accused of threatening to cut up one witness and stuff the remains into a suitcase.
The FBI also arrested Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumar in Sacramento, California, for sending explosive blood threats to the judge in Mississippi.
And a woman in Ohio named Michelle Francine Edwards, who made 30 separate bomb calls to Mississippi state offices.
It is absolute madness. The sheer geography of the internet allows someone in Illinois or California to project their own rage and conspiracy theories onto a tragedy in Mississippi.
It creates a terrifying, chaotic environment for everyone involved, including the grieving family who just wants answers, not bomb threats.
But amidst the noise, the conspiracy theories, and the political grandstanding, independent researchers who were quietly combing through the actual boring government documents found something that genuinely stops you in your tracks.
A mechanical piece of evidence that changes the entire scope of the day.
The grandfather anomaly.
Yes. Independent researchers pulled the official incident reports filed by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the MDMR. This is the state agency responsible for marine policing.
And listed on that official report as an involved entity is a man named Jerry Ralph Agerson.
I've read through the accounts of the teenagers on the boat. Who is Jerry?
Jerry is identified in the sources as Wyatt's grandfather, Wyatt being the captain of the 22-foot Triton.
Okay, let's unpack this slowly. We have a narrative entirely focused on a group of teenagers and 20-somethings partying on a barrier island. Trayston mentioned an uncle yelling from a boat, but the core group is young. Why is an elderly grandfather listed as an involved entity on the official state marine resources report of this incident?
The mechanics of how someone ends up on an MDMR report are strict. You aren't listed just because you are a relative of someone involved. You are listed if you were physically present at the scene, if you were the registered owner of a vessel involved in an incident, or if you actively interacted with marine law enforcement during the course of their response.
This is a massive, glaring loose end. Was Jerry physically on Horn Island that day? Did he own the boats the teenagers were driving?
When the boys allegedly thought their boat was sinking at 4 p.m., did they bypass the Coast Guard and call the grandfather instead? Did he assist with towing the boats after the fact?
Or, in the darkest interpretation considered by those analyzing the case, did he help coordinate a cover-up before the authorities were fully involved? Did he advise them on what to do with the cell phone or the GPS data?
The sources don't have the definitive answer yet, but the fact that his name is officially recorded in the state's law enforcement documentation while he remains completely, totally absent from the media narrative pushed by the boys in their interviews is highly suspicious.
It shows that there are adults, potentially with significant local boating experience and influence, intimately tied to the timeline of that day.
So what does this all mean when we pull all these disparate threads together? The missing 30 minutes, the wiped phone, the withheld throat, the canceled tow call, and the grandfather on the report.
It means we have to bring the focus back to where it absolutely belongs. The Wansley family. Christine and Elmore are living a waking nightmare.
They are stuck in a purgatory between a stalled, seemingly opaque local investigation that is hoarding evidence, a raging national media circus that is politicizing their son's death, and the agonizing permanent loss of Nolan.
Justice in this case does not mean picking a political side. Justice means demanding the undeniable, forensic, timeline-backed truth wherever it leads, no matter who it implicates or exonerates.
It means extracting the data from that phone in front of federal witnesses. It means demanding transparency on why the anterior neck structures were withheld.
To everyone listening, we encourage you to keep asking fact-based, respectful questions. Keep looking at the GPS data, keep questioning the physics of a sinking boat, keep questioning the timelines, and above all, keep supporting the family.
Justice for Nolan Wells means not letting this story fade away into the muddy waters of the Gulf Coast. It means demanding that the authorities do their job in the light of day.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something for you to mull over that builds on the mechanics of everything we've discussed today. Consider the legal and physical concept of maritime jurisdiction.
It's a huge factor here.
When a tragedy happens on the land, one police department usually takes the lead. But when it happens on the water, you are moving between federal barrier islands, open bays, and state lines. Jurisdiction becomes incredibly muddy, bouncing between local county sheriffs, state marine resources, and the federal Coast Guard.
And when multiple agencies are involved, communication inevitably breaks down.
Exactly. In a case where every single minute of a 30-minute window matters, where every deleted text message is a clue, and where every Garmin GPS coordinate is vital, does the sheer ungovernable geography of the ocean naturally create the perfect environment for evidence to vanish?
Does it create a scenario where accountability can simply drown in the bureaucracy of competing agencies?
It brings us right back to where we started. A crime scene on land has yellow tape, but a crime scene on the water, the tide just washes the tape away. And it's up to us to keep looking for what got pulled under. Keep seeking the truth,
share, and
everyone.
subscribe.
We owe it to Nolan.
JMG, Block Band Entertainment, JMG, baby.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe.